No. Okay.
Anything for a camera?
Keep using those Z-zone face-off exits. We looked at them this morning here. You got to rim it D, rim it hard. Forwards, get out there, battle it out. Make sure we got to push the pace here. Pump it up here. We're here for a fucking reason because we're a fucking good hockey team and we're going to fucking come home with the cup here tonight. Let's fucking go. Sonny, Cole, Perry, better. Let's go.
Let's start at the beginning. The whole reason Craig Berube has a job in this league is because of what happened in St. Louis in 2019. The Blues were dead last in January, Berube took over, and they won the Stanley Cup. It's one of the greatest turnarounds in NHL history.
A team that was in last place on January 3rd. The players on the bench are bouncing up. History will be made tonight in Boston. The wait is over, and the St. Louis Blues are the Stanley Cup champions for the first time in franchise history.
They are Stanley Cup champions together. This is not a dream.
Nobody can take that away from them. But here's the thing. A lot of people in the hockey world think that run had very little to do with Berube. When the Blues were losing under Mike Yeo, their goaltending was a disaster. Their team's save percentage was sitting around .891, which is basically a death sentence in the NHL. Then Jordan Binnington came up, and almost overnight, that number jumped to around .921. That's a massive swing. The team didn't suddenly become a different team. They just stopped leaking goals every single night. The Blues were already a decent possession team under Yeo. They were generating chances. The problem was the puck kept going in the wrong net. When Binnington fixed that, the wins followed. Critics argue Berube was basically in the right place at the right time. A new voice in the room, a hot goalie, and a roster that was better than its record suggested. The comparison that gets thrown around a lot is Dan Bylsma. He inherited a loaded Pittsburgh team, won a cup, and then spent years getting exposed as the league passed him by. The worry with Berube is that the same pattern is playing out in slow motion. And then there's the Jim Montgomery factor. Montgomery was Berube's offensive assistant in St. Louis, and the year the Blues actually looked like a modern, high-scoring team, around 2021 to 2022. A lot of people credited Montgomery's system for that. When Montgomery left for Boston, he turned the Bruins into a record-breaking machine. When he left St. Louis, the Blues went back to being slow and plodding, and Berube was eventually fired in December 2023. That sequence tells a story. It suggests Berube is a motivator who needs a tactical mind beside him to actually make things work. If the 2019 Cup run is the foundation of Berube's reputation, the Jordan Kyrou fallout is the crack running right through it. After Berube was fired in St. Louis, Kyrou was asked about his former coach. His response? "I've got no comment. He's not my coach anymore." That's it. That was the whole quote.
What would you want to say about Craig Berube? I mean, he's mentioned that he was your coach for a long time, but like, how did he impact your career? I mean, what can you say about that?
I love playing here, so it's tough to hear the fans booing me there. Yeah, definitely. I mean, like I said, I just want to focus on my future and focus on, trying to be a more complete player and, what I can do to help the team win, right? So, that's just my goal right now.
Blues fans booed Kyrou for it. But if you actually think about what that quote means, a player who just won a Stanley Cup with a guy refusing to say a single positive thing about him, that tells you everything about the relationship. The story behind the scenes is that Berube consistently used Kyrou as a public punching bag. When the team struggled defensively, Kyrou got scratched. When the team lost, Kyrou got called out in press conferences. Berube's version of accountability is very public, very blunt, and it works great for some players. But for a creative, skill-based guy like Kyrou, it was apparently suffocating. This is the core tension with Berube. His whole identity as a coach comes from his playing career. He was an enforcer, a fighter, a guy who earned his spot through toughness and sacrifice. That mentality works in a locker room speech. It works for a fourth line grinder who needs to be reminded what he's playing for. But when you apply that same framework to a guy like Kyrou or Mitch Marner or William Nylander, players whose value comes from creativity, instinct, and freedom, it creates friction. Those guys don't need to be toughened up. They need to be trusted. The Kyrou situation wasn't just a personality clash. It was a preview of what was coming in Toronto. Here's where the real analytical criticism of Berube lives. The modern NHL is built around speed, puck possession, and controlled zone entries. Teams that carry the puck into the offensive zone with possession generate more shots, more chances, and more goals. This isn't a controversial opinion anymore. It's basically settled science in hockey analytics. Berube's system is the opposite of that. He runs a dump and chase forecheck. His teams play a linear north-south style. Get the puck deep, grind it out, win battles along the boards. That style can work if you have the right personnel. Big, fast wingers who can win races to pucks. Physical forwards who can dominate corners. A defense that can handle the chaos of a forecheck-heavy game. The Toronto Maple Leafs are not that team. When Sheldon Keefe was coaching the Leafs, they were a possession machine. They carried the puck, they cycled, they generated offense through skill and movement. It wasn't always pretty in the playoffs, but the underlying numbers were strong. When Berube took over, those numbers fell off a cliff. The Leafs went from being one of the better possession teams in the league to sitting near the bottom in shot attempts and zone time. The reason is simple. The Leafs roster, built around Austin Matthews, Mitch Marner, and William Nylander, is designed for a possession game. These are not dump and chase players. When you ask Marner to forecheck instead of create, you're wasting his best qualities. When you dump the puck in against a team that's faster than you on the retrieval, you just give the puck away. And that's exactly what kept happening. There were stretches where the Leafs were going entire periods with barely any shots on net because they couldn't get out of their own end. The criticism isn't just that Berube's system is old-fashioned, it's that he applied an old-fashioned system to a roster that was specifically built to play a different way. That's a fundamental mismatch, and it showed every single night. One of the clearest signs that things were falling apart in Toronto came with the power play. At its peak, the Leafs had one of the best power plays in the league. Under Berube, it cratered to somewhere around the worst in the NHL, converting on roughly 1 in 8 opportunities, which is genuinely terrible for a team with the offensive talent Toronto has. Berube brought in Mark Savard, a former player and longtime associate, to run the power play. When it kept failing, Savard got fired 2 days before Christmas, which the media absolutely roasted as a classless move. But the deeper issue wasn't Savard. They thought the power play was failing because the entries were bad and the setup was static. It was predictable. Teams knew exactly what was coming, and that predictability traces back to the overall system philosophy, not the guy drawing up the plays. Savard became the scapegoat for a systemic problem, and when management fired him while publicly backing Berube, it sent a message that the organization was in panic mode, making reactive moves to buy time rather than addressing the actual root cause. There's a moment that crystallized the Berube problem in Toronto better than any stat. After a bad loss to Washington, something like a 4-0 blowout, Berube was asked why his team didn't compete with the same passion as the Capitals.
What made the Capitals a challenge for you guys here tonight?
His answer was essentially, ask those guys, not me.
You know, we had power play opportunities. Power play was not good. Ask those guys, not me.
That quote went everywhere. And it went everywhere because it captured something that a lot of people had been feeling for a while. That Berube had run out of answers and was starting to point fingers at his players publicly. A modern NHL coach, when his team gets blown out, is expected to take ownership. He's expected to say, we need to be better tactically, or I need to put them in better positions. What he's not supposed to do is tell the media to go ask the players why they didn't care. That's an abdication of responsibility. It's the kind of comment that destroys a locker room, because now the players know their coach is throwing them under the bus. This is the pattern that keeps repeating. In St. Louis, when things went wrong, Berube's default was to question effort and heart. In Toronto, same thing. The problem is that when you're losing because your system doesn't work, questioning heart doesn't fix anything. It just creates resentment. For Toronto fans of a certain age, the Berube era has an uncomfortable familiarity to it. Randy Carlyle won a Stanley Cup with Anaheim in 2007. He came to Toronto with a reputation as a tough, defensive-minded coach who would instill accountability and grit. He talked about truculence. He wanted the Leafs to be harder to play against. Sound familiar? Carlyle's Leafs saw their possession numbers crater. They were kept afloat for a while by strong goaltending, but when that dried up, the results collapsed. He was eventually fired, and the Leafs spent years rebuilding the analytical credibility of their program. The Berube era in Toronto has followed almost the exact same arc. New coach, new culture, early optimism, possession numbers fall, goaltending carries the team for a while, results collapse, locker room tension, firing. The hockey world has seen this movie before. That's a big part of why the respect isn't there, because the ending feels inevitable. Here's the thing that gets lost in all the Berube criticism. He didn't hire himself. Brad Treliving and the Maple Leafs organization made a deliberate choice to go in this direction. They looked at a team built around elite skill players and decided what it needed was a tough, old-school coach to instill accountability. That decision was always going to create friction. It's similar to what's been happening at Chelsea in the Premier League, where ownership keeps making decisions that contradict the identity of the roster they've built. You can't spend years assembling a skill-based, possession-oriented team and then hire a coach whose entire philosophy runs counter to that. Something has to give, and it's usually the players who suffer most. The Leafs built a roster around Matthews, Marner, and Nylander, 3 of the most skilled players in the world. Then they hired a coach whose system asks those players to dump pucks in and win board battles. We feel the mismatch was baked in from day one. Berube deserves criticism for not adapting, but the organization deserves equal criticism for creating the situation in the first place. The common denominator argument that the same patterns keep emerging everywhere Berube coaches is real. But so is the argument that he keeps getting put in situations where the roster doesn't fit his system. At some point, both things can be true. Craig Berube is not a bad person. He's not even necessarily a bad coach in every context. He's a guy who genuinely connects with certain types of players, who can deliver a locker room speech that raises the hair on the back of your neck, and who has a Stanley Cup ring that nobody can take away from him. But the hockey world has moved on from what he represents. The game is faster, the analytics are more sophisticated, and the players, especially the elite ones, expect to be coached in a way that respects their intelligence and their skill sets. Berube's toolkit hasn't kept pace with those changes. The lack of respect isn't personal, it's professional. It's the hockey world looking at the evidence. The possession numbers, the Kyrou fallout, the power play collapse, the ask those guys press conference, and concluding that what worked in a specific moment in 2019 isn't a sustainable model for building a winner in today's NHL. Until Berube can show that he's evolved, that he can adapt his system to his roster, manage modern players without alienating them, and take tactical ownership when things go wrong, the skepticism isn't going anywhere.